back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all for sticking with me through this continued journey of not only telling our story, but being able to share everybody else's story as well and getting the message out about pediatric cancer. Today, my guest is Keith, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about his daughter, McKenna, their journey through pediatric cancer, the foundation that they've started, and really just kind of allow them to get their message out. So, Keith, thank you so much for being with me today.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. So we can jump right in. McKenna's story. She was born 9/9/12 and was our middle child, and super spunky, incredible little girl, vibrant, full of life, kind of my little jokester, prankster, all the middle child things, right? And super healthy. Just kind of moving along through life. And at 10 years old, which would have been August 2023, well, I guess earlier that summer of 2023, she started to have some really weird episodic headaches. No other real symptoms, just would get these headaches. And we did, all of the kind of natural parent stuff, right? Dehydration, vitamins, nutrition, all of that stuff. Happened a couple of times. We thought this is weird, tried to catch it like in the middle of one. We'd try to get her to like an urgent care or something, and it just never really panned out. No one could figure out. There was no real concern either. And this kind of continued through the summer, off and on, I'd say June and July. And then August brings the start of school. She was starting her 5th grade year, and literally the first day of school for all 3 of our kids, she is in bad shape, very sick. Headache, nausea starting to kick in. Her mom and I notice as she's like walking down the hall towards the bathroom, she's kind of losing her balance and stuff like that. But she was okay, but clearly not doing well. So Janelle said, okay, this is weird. I'm going to take her to the pediatrician. We had an excellent relationship with our pediatrician, incredible doctor, was very kind of involved in looking deeper rather than just dismissing and stuff like that. So she was definitely concerned, and she said, look, with as much as it's been off and on, and now these escalated symptoms, I don't want you to go home. We're getting you an MRI today. I want to figure out what's going on. And she really dug in, as opposed to just, well, let's kind of talk to imaging and schedule for 3 weeks and, the way that it can go. She said, no, we're doing this now. And so Janelle took her that afternoon, got an MRI, and we got the results back, pretty quickly. I believe it was that afternoon as far as just imaging. We hadn't had a chance to talk to a doctor or anything like that, but because in between her small brain and big brain, right in line with DIPG, DMG, but it was a slightly different actual location, right? But we knew that there was a tumor in there and there was a problem. So we went straight to Children's Mercy from the MRI. I met them down there. And typically what I've come to learn after the fact is a lot of these tumors can't be surgically removed. A lot of them can't even be biopsied with the risk of additional damage and all of those things. We got those MRIs, and we had a incredible neurosurgical team meet us almost immediately and started looking at it, and they said, look, this one's a little bit different. And the surgeon was like, I can get this thing out of there. And so we immediately booked it for 2 days later, and she had an 8-hour brain surgery, held like a champ. Everything went absolutely according to plan. At that time, we had no pathology. And so the surgeon comes out and he's like, I got it. Like, I got it. And so we are thinking, oh my goodness, and she's stable, she's recovering well. Spend a couple days doing that, and then the pathology comes back. And so we were told it was diffuse midline glioma, which, at this point, neither of us had even heard of. And we, they gave us all of the news, right? 0 survivability, average life expectancy 6 to 12 months. And we're just sitting there like, and so at that point, we did not feel like we were offered a whole lot of solutions, right? They certainly told us that there are trial medicine for brain tumor children in America, and a little bit of here's your stack of papers. And so at that point, we just said, well, we're checking out of the hospital and we're going to go figure this out. She had been cleared and had recovered for 5, 6, 7 days. I can't even remember how long it was, honestly, at this point. But we went ahead and got out of there, and she was in great shape doing OT, PT, and we just went to work trying to find anything, right? Diving into all of the trial medicine, the stuff in Seattle, the stuff in San Francisco. This was August, so we're coming up on 3 years at this point. So there's more, I think, now than there were then, but not a whole lot of options. And what we kept running into was, because we had these incredible surgical results, she had no tumor at the time we were applying for these trials. So there was no measurable disease. So she technically did not meet trial criteria for anything. And so my wife is an incredible administrator among many other things, and we really leaned on friends and family, and we got people together on Zoom meetings on Sunday afternoons, and hey, what field are you in? What can we had microbiologists looking into stuff worldwide. We were looking at treatments in Japan, multiple things in Europe, and we wound up settling on an experimental immunotherapy dendritic cell vaccine with a clinic in Cologne, Germany, because we just felt like we had no other choice. We knew after we got the news about diffuse midline glioma, and you spend about 15 minutes researching that, that there's virtually no chance that if you don't do anything, that this thing is not going to come back. And when it does, at this point, I believe pretty much 100% of the time it's game over. And so we were like, well, we have to do something. And so we packed up all three of our kids, my wife and myself, and moved to Cologne, Germany for her treatments. And we got there on January of 2024. So it was very fast. All of this is happening very fast. And she started treatment 3 or 4 days after that. Everything was super stable. The one thing that I will say is, it's in hindsight, having gone all the way through the experience, we virtually never had her compromised by any kind of side effects from anything. Like, even from when diagnosis to when we went to Germany, she was running around with her brother and sister. She was fully functional. It was almost bizarrely couldn't even tell that she had had this surgery about 3 or 4 months later. It was literally miraculous. I've never even seen anything like it. So we go to Germany, and we have, wound up tragically, we have an incredible family experience over there. We're there for about 6 weeks. We were supposed to be there for about 3 months, and then we would go home and then come back annually was kind of the plan. And about mid-February, third week of February, mid-February, she started kind of not feeling great again, and the headaches were coming back. We had recently it was kind of one of those things where it's 4 or 5 days on, then you have a week off, and then 4 or 5 days on. And so we had a recent liquid biopsy. Everything showed that everything looked good. Tumor markers were where they were supposed to be. We believed that was the case. However, whether that was wrong or incorrect, I'm not 100% sure how that happened, but we had progression, and that's what it was. And we got her to a hospital in Cologne, and we tried to get her stabilized enough to fly home, and then kind of desperately seek a, Hail Mary effort there if we could just get home. And unfortunately, that did not happen, and she passed in Cologne on February 26th of 2024. And so her entire journey was very short. That tumor is very aggressive. And, again, you understand the devastation, the atomic bomb that goes off in the family, and personally as a father. And so it was tough, would be kind of an understatement. And walked through the grief, leaned on the family, the friends, and started shortly after she passed, later in 2024, August of 24, founded the Brave Like McKenna Foundation, which we provide direct financial family support for folks nationally that are in the fight. If you have a pediatric cancer diagnosis in your home, you can apply on our website, and we will pay your mortgage or your car payment or whatever you need. And so that way of working through it, we are certainly in the short term, I feel like, of this process. I personally have found, which is how I kind of keyed in on some of your messages that I saw online, I have personally been drawn to a lot of the advocacy and awareness parts of, our pillars are research, family support, and advocacy. And so family support, we've really started in immediately, and that's been kind of our main vein. And I've started to branch out in the advocacy and awareness department. And so I've been working a lot with Climb the Hill over the last couple of years. I worked a ton on the Michaela Nalon Give Kids a Chance Act, and it's been incredibly cathartic for me to, build this community and meet all these other people that understand, but also giving the folks who want to an opportunity to speak about their story to senators and representatives on the federal level while we're trying to, push for landslide legislation that could change a portion of the game for these kids. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on personally. And that's kind of, the Reader's Digest version of our story. And any questions in there? I kind of just threw it.
Oh, listen, first of all, I think we can both agree there's not a lot of us dads on the front lines that we're behind the scenes, right? And, I think that's societal norm for us almost is to be behind the scenes, put the weight on our shoulders and just carry the family forward. And it's almost like we're not allowed to show our emotions or we're not supposed to, and so, while I'm sad that we're both in this position and we're both without our kids, I'm glad that you're taking the step and being on the forefront of this and, giving us a voice, because the more of us that are saying the same things, the more people are going to listen to what we're saying.
I agree 100%.
So, we travel to D.C. multiple times. We've been there and, to be a part of legislation. We speak to legislators. Advocacy is a huge part of what we do. It's actually, kind of taken on a more forward front role based on our organization, because that's where it is. Without us doing that, without us being parents, being forward, telling our stories, allowing our kids' legacies to be secured by, I think our come to peace moment is that we couldn't save our daughter, but we may be able to save others with their message, with how they lived and how they put in their short lives, what they were able to give us. And I believe wholeheartedly that our children, although they're not here, were sent here to kind of guide us on a mission as to what we were supposed to do later in life. We didn't, I know I didn't, and I'm sure you didn't wake up yesterday or, the day when your child passed and said, you know what, I'm going to be an advocate. No, I think we were meant to do this. We just didn't know what the message was going to be.
I agree.
And so now we're sharing that.
Yeah, I think the universe has an interesting way, or God, if that's where, anyone's at. I think, there's an interesting way of these opportunities being presented for us. And we still need to have the courage to kind of defy some of those norms. And it's tough sometimes, because I still struggle to, if I get up in front of a room of 100 people or 300 people or 1,000 people and tell this story, I'm gonna get emotional. Like, there's just no two ways about it. And that's pretty vulnerable, and I think that, again, the more of us are able to make that decision when you come to those crossroads and do the hard things, I think we've seen progress. We need a lot more. But I think that we are seeing progress. I actually, the first clip I found of yours was one where you were talking about, and I honestly have thought the same thing, and I think that a great advantage lies in some of the allies that we have found in Congress thus far. But having parents somehow getting elected to some of these offices, people with the experience who know about how important it is. The patient size, I think, in my couple of years of kind of digging around is seriously inhibitive of our ability to gain that national recognition, just because there's not so many kids. But it doesn't matter how many kids there are when it's your kid, right? It's not rare anymore when it's your kid. And so there are people who do not have that direct experience and that emotional, direct contact that are starting to understand that. And I think that is very, very cool. And we're finding that we have folks in Congress that have pediatric cancer experience, whether it's kind of juxtaposed to their family or something that may have happened a long time ago, when we start talking about it, it comes up, right? Oh my goodness, random conversations. Oh, what do you do? And then I talk about McKenna, and then, that happened to my sister 20 years ago. Okay, there's a connection. I see stuff like that, and I hear stuff like that happen all the time. And so it's out there, but it does require a lot of work to get folks invested, and it is growing, and I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's, I know we've been at this now for 6 years, almost 7 years, and, legislation it's terribly difficult to get passed. It's terribly difficult to get even to the next step. And obviously you can see that with the Give Kids a Chance Act, what that took to get across the finish line. And that's
years.
And we hear, right? And this, again, and I do my best to stay out of the political spectrum, but we hear every day, no matter what side you're on, common sense, right? We hear common sense legislation for whatever the cause is. But yet common sense for kids, like I just don't understand why that's something that's controversial. I don't get it. And when you see these acts or these bills and they sit in Congress, or you've got one person that stands up and doesn't like it, and you wonder why. What is it about kids surviving and becoming the future that is hard to understand? Because without them, you have nobody to keep you in office. There's nobody to reelect you because these kids aren't getting to 18 and being able to vote. It seems simple to me, and these kids don't understand left and right. They don't understand Democrat and Republican. They just understand that there's a bunch of people that kind of just shut the door in their face,
And I think that, unfortunately, because I'm the same way, I have tried incredibly hard most of my life to stay middle of the road and as far out of it as possible. It's just, to me, can be a very ugly, ugly scene, right? And so I've never been attracted to it in general, but I felt like I really needed to get involved here. I think that, individual foundations, private foundations, there's some different states that are doing some incredible things regarding pediatric cancer directly. But in order to really move the needle, we've got to have federal level legislation. We've got to have federal level money, support, all of those things. And so my experience wading in here that I was very unsure of, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I would imagine you were alluding to the Bernie Sanders standing up and vetoing it or whatever, being the one person that spoke against it, which then kicked it all back into the washing machine to come out a couple of months later. And my experience is that it seems that on a whole, we could be facing a situation where the political system in general is incredibly broken, okay? And so then we have, because I would imagine and I would hope and I gotta believe, as a human who has a basic level of belief in the rest of humanity, right, that folks like Bernie would not be against helping kids, right? But what they have is an opportunity to pull a leverage play, okay? And their party and their agenda and whatever else they have cooking and going on becomes the priority. And if I have to stand out here and do this and be the bad guy in order to appease these people over here or my agenda or whatever it is, I certainly don't claim to have like direct insight into these different camps and stuff like that. This is just my kind of 30,000 foot view from a newcomer to the whole thing. And then those agendas are priority over what is right now, and this opportunity right now. And sometimes, again, adhering back to the political system, that also comes down to the way that some of these votes are conducted and the way that, like, a single individual can, how in 2026 are we still doing some of this extremely antiquated stuff? And again, that's not my job. I'm just learning about these things, but I'm a business owner, operator, 20 years, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, what are we doing? Which then creates this system where it is incredibly hard to do anything, much less anything productive or anything coming from a vein that may not have national attention and, the different kind of hot button topics that are always flying around from the senators and the committees and things like that. So lots of challenges in there, I think. But, I also have over the years kind of developed this system where I really get agitated about people who bitch and moan and complain and don't go do anything about it. right? Whatever it is. And so I'm like, okay, well, that can't be me. We're not going the hypocrite level. And so, and as important as this is to me, and I have been, despite our tragedy, been blessed with, my wife and I have developed a business. We own a couple of restaurants. We have great teams in place. We are flexible. We are capable of doing this work and putting more time and energy into this. And so that's what we're going to do. And, again, I'm still learning so much about it. But yeah, I'm kind of, I think I'm here to stay for a while.
Yeah. No, I listen, this advocacy game and getting into this and being, whether you're traveling to Washington or you're going to your home state capital or you're just going to your local, representative office, it's not for the weak at heart, but it's also nothing in comparison to what we have been through as families, as parents, as siblings and things like that. Watching your child go through something horrible like pediatric cancer, listening to your story, and I hear all the mirrors about how we were in there. Getting that call, we had to rush to Children's, and then they do an emergency CT that shows a quote unquote mass because they're very careful not to say what it is right up front. But when we had the neurosurgeon came in, he said, "I know exactly what this is, but I can't say anything for certain until they have the pathology on it." But he knew what it was. And for us, it was a 10-hour surgery. We shut down the waiting room, waiting for, everything to come out. And when the surgeon comes out and his hands are a different color because he's had gloves on for 10 hours, squeezing off the circulation, but he got it out of there. And we thought we were in the clear. We thought, it's perfect resection. We went home after 12 days. She got up and walked herself out of the hospital 2 days before her 7th birthday because she decided, that's what these kids do.
So you guys had a resection as well?
Total resection, yeah.
I did not know that part. Wow, that is okay. That's pretty rare, I think. And so for both of us to have experienced that, or both our kids rather, I mean, that's okay. Well, yeah, exactly how that, like, you think, my Lord, we were the ones. I can't even believe it. How you're on your knees thanking God because you understand what's at stake, and then you ride on that for a couple of days. There comes the pathology. So, yeah, I understand 100%. And part of what that I would love to continue to work on as well is in the family support vein, the mental health piece for the parents. Whether they're in it and able to, actually say, okay, I need to go to some counseling or, talk to somebody. I mean, it's very, very hard. You got the blinders on, you're barely hanging on, you're freaking out internally. As a dad, you're just trying to hold it together and figure out some sort of solution, whether they're able to talk to somebody or if they become I think that if you become a bereaved parent, I think that you should have like mental health care, top dollar mental health care provided by the government for like the rest of your life. Would be like, a home run swing for me if I could pull something like that off. But I've got lots of energy on all these different, areas of support. And oh man, I just, and it's tough because we work and we work and we work and we got, the first thought I had when the Give Kids a Chance Act got passed, we had worked. And I only came in probably maybe the last year or so as that thing. I had not been involved in any of the preceding years that Nancy was working on everything and almost there. And we work and work and work and we get this and so much opportunity to gain so much ground. But I couldn't help but just sit there and think tomorrow morning, some family is going to be sitting in the waiting room doing the exact same thing. This is a major victory, but we are so far because it's still happening and the rates are increasing. And yeah, so like I said, it's a lot of work, long way to go. But I think we're finding some guys and some ladies that are built for it, for sure. Your organization, a lot of others in the Midwest that we've come to know, Nancy's organization, Kids v. Cancer, doing Climb the Hill, Mike and Dina doing Cure Fest, and I mean, there's some things going on for sure. Yeah.
No, you're 100% right. And I think we've come so far from where we were. I mean, our daughter was diagnosed in 2020, and, we felt like we were absolutely on an island. And I think so many families feel like that. You're rushed into a hospital, into these CTs, these MRIs, these surgeries, and you have nobody to turn to, and you have nowhere to go, nobody to ask questions, nobody to lean on. And that's kind of part of everything that we're doing. And that mental health side is something that a lot of times gets left out of the mix. And, for me, throwing myself into my work and staying busy is my therapy. But that's not right for everybody. And a lot of people just need that help and that guidance. And the reality of it is that, I've done episodes before in social media, if anybody follows, where I talk about support. And support, a lot of times when either your child rings the bell and goes on with their life or your child passes, that support almost cuts in half and goes away because people feel like, well, they don't need it anymore, or their child's, the famous, your child's hair grows back, so they must be okay, or, your child passes. So, for lack of a better way to put it, what are you crying about? It's like, no, I think that if your child rings the bell, if your child is in maintenance treatment, that's when the fight really starts, because up until then, you've been, at doctor's appointments round the clock. You live half your life in a hospital, in a doctor's office, but you ring that bell, the maintenance treatment comes on, you're in your 5-year survivorship, you're on the edge of your seat every time a scan's coming up around the corner, a new bruise shows up, a bloody nose, whatever. And if your child passes, you are forever wondering, what did I do wrong as a parent? What did we miss? You traveled across the country. We did everything we could. And in my heart, as a dad, I know we did everything we could to save our daughter. But at the same time, I also have always felt like a failure because I feel like we failed. We must have missed something. But, when you look at the rates of pediatric cancer, they're going up. They're not getting better. When our daughter was diagnosed, that big number was 43 kids a day. Now it's 47. So
Right.
there's obviously something happening. The 4% number, sometimes it's called 8%. Really depends on who you talk to. Still sucks. And, the rate of brain cancer funding is less than 1%, and it's the deadliest form of pediatric cancer, and we know the least about it. You look at these bigger, the people know DIPG, they know DMG, they know these bigger names. Our daughter had CPC, nobody's ever heard of it, right? And if you have heard of it, it's got a horrible survival rate. Most of these brain cancers, they come in. Our oncologist, his literal words were, it's choroid plexus carcinoma, and the prognosis isn't good. That's what he said to us. Those were his guiding light words. And what are we as parents? You're in shock, sitting there wondering, well, what the hell do we do now? Where do we go from here? And so, of course, we become Google doctors. We become internet searchers. We're trying to figure it out. What do we do? And, for us, it was the same thing. She had 30 rounds of radiation. You would have no idea this child had brain surgery and, all of this, and hydrocephalus and all of these things. You have no idea. She came home. She'd play with her friends. Of course, at that point, we were in COVID time, so we broke a little bit of the rules and let them play with the neighbors because they're kids. But you'd never know. And she was good for almost 4 months, and then she relapsed almost overnight, and it went completely sideways.
Man, we have such similar stories.
Yeah.
Such similar stories.
It really is crazy when you listen to other parents, you talk to the parents, and like the timeline almost matches up all the time, and those symptoms and the signs and the relapses, and then you wonder, why is nobody else listening to this? There's this many stories that are exactly the same. We're obviously not making this up.
And I think a good way to help kind of project the magnitude, again, to someone who may not have a direct, experience with pediatric cancer is think about the ripple effect, okay? And so, the ripple effect, throw a stone in, goes out, right? And when I, in no way, shape, or form, and I'm sure you understand, am I trying to like undermine an older person getting cancer and passing away, okay? But when an older person gets cancer and passes away, it is incredibly sad. It is incredibly tragic. Most likely that is a parent, and so their kids go through some grief. But I think in general, it's just, I hate to even say it because it sounds callous, easier to kind of navigate that. And that blast radius, right, is significantly smaller. Now, when you have a kid who's my daughter, 10 years old, passes at 11, I was 44, my wife and I were 44 when that happened. She had a sister who was 15 and a brother who was 8, okay? So that ripple effect, and then also because of the tragedy of it being a child, a friend, a schoolmate of all these girls in our neighborhood who are not emotionally equipped to deal with this kind of thing. Like the ripple effect and the damage that it causes is, I mean, you could be talking about, I mean, my son, I hope he lives to maybe he's 90. He was 8. That's 82 years of, or I probably didn't math that right. Maybe we could cut that, but that's 80 years of damage and potential, mental patterns and issues and emotional trauma this kid working through. And certainly growing up and maturing and things of that nature, seeking counseling is all helpful, but it doesn't seem the same. It just seems like that blast radius and that ripple effect is so much bigger when you're talking about a kid. And so can we get people to understand that in order to contain this blast radius, we have to make this a front and center issue, and we have to stop letting, hopefully all, but definitely so many kids die from cancer or complications of treatments at an extremely young age. Like, we got to curb some of that. We got to shut that down and send that in the other direction. I don't expect it to all happen overnight. I don't think anyone does. But good Lord, can we just, stem the bleeding and start heading in the other direction? And we're not doing that. I'm not super engaged with the statistics of some of these other cancers. Clearly, you see Susan G. Komen and breast cancer is an easy one to say that's huge. And they have an incredible platform and support, nationwide. So and I don't know, maybe you know the answer to this, have the occurrences of breast cancer gone down with all of that attention to it and that size of platform? I honestly don't know the answer to that, but seems like it would certainly help. And so I think that, that's the challenge. And then, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And so keep showing up, keep building this community, keep coming to CureFest, keep going to Climb the Hill, keep, letting more and more kids and families know that these opportunities are there, for advocacy and maybe some healing, and just, keep it moving one day at a time.
Yeah, that's all you can do. Obviously, we get up every day and, what's the next challenge going to be? I mean, I don't know what that next challenge is going to be. We have this, and when it comes to starting out this advocacy and all that kind of stuff, originally what I said when I started all this was I want gold to be as big as pink, meaning I want us to be as huge. I want us to be the Susan G. Komen of the childhood cancer world, not because I want television ads and billboards and stuff. I want us to be recognized. Everybody knows what pink is. Everybody knows what it stands for. We get kicked out halfway through the month of September so they can start pushing for October. I get it. And the reality of it is I've actually reached out. I've never heard back. I would love to work together with Susan G. Komen or any breast cancer organization to bring in the vision that girls diagnosed with cancer, kids, are more susceptible to breast cancer later in life because of the treatments.
Because of the treatments.
So yeah, there's a connection there that we're missing. And all the funding that goes into it, all the different organizations, even the DOD funds breast cancer research. We have to kind of understand why it is that our kids are left out of the story, why it is they're not important enough. Now listen, I think I have always said that the most simple answer to that is that they can't vote. They can't make a difference in who's going to be in those offices, in those positions, in those spots. But in talking about years and years of trauma, I think with children that are passing away, you're losing, I think, an average of almost 70 years of life every time a child passes away from cancer. That's 70 years of judges, doctors, researchers, police officers, hell, even presidents that we're losing out on. Our daughter said she wanted to be a nurse. She was going to go to the medical field. Lord knows what she would have done or what she would have brought to the table had she had that opportunity. You know what I mean? What would McKenna have brought to the table later in life if she would have been given the opportunity to move forward and get past all of these treatments and not forget about it, not ever, but own what you went through and pass that on to the next generation? What are we missing out on every single day? You know, I just did an episode a few weeks ago and put out social media talking about bittersweet moments. Bittersweet moments. I just watched our 17-year-old graduate from high school. I now have 2 children graduated from high school. JC will never do that. She will never graduate. She will never get a job, drive a car, have a career, go on with her life. So while I'm happy and that just the happiest and most proud girl dad on the planet because of my other 2 daughters moving forward in their life, I will never see JC do that. And there's so many families out there that are just like you and I that are missing those moments, missing those growing up moments. She would have been 13 this year, getting ready for 8th grade, getting ready for high school, all of these things. And I'll never see that. We'll never see that. Her sisters will never get to have her tagging along, going on Starbucks runs, stealing their boyfriends, whatever. They'll never have those opportunities. And it may seem insignificant when you say it to people, but I also have to look at it like this. When you go into a senator's office, a representative's office, somebody that you're looking to help fund what you're doing or to just be an ally, they have pictures of children on their desk, on their walls. That's their kids. And my simple message is not a threat. It's not meant to scare you. It's a statistical reality. It could be your child any day because it was our kids. And no amount of anything that I ever thought in my life, seeing, the symptoms that she had, that I think we would be in a position like this, that it was going to lead to cancer. Okay, her main symptom was constipation, some arm pain. She had some swelling of the optic nerve. Never thought in a million years we were going to be basically a part of that commercial that we all have seen and thought that that'll never be us, or that's terrible. We're here. It could be you any day because we simply don't understand enough about it. And, we go into, talking about clinical trials and treatments and things like that. And that's a whole nother game that you've got to try to figure out. But, as parents, then we become caregivers and we become nurses, we become travel agents, we become, drivers, researchers, we're everything. And just like I think doctors kind of cast us off a little bit with not giving us the big words because we may not understand them, I think politicians do the same thing. We don't understand how it works or, why there's got to be 76 votes to get to a vote and all this other stuff. You're right. There's probably a lot of stuff we don't understand, but you've got to give us credit because we show up every day because we can't clock out.
Exactly. And I keyed in on what you mentioned earlier, those bittersweet moments. And, it's like you start the grief process, for those of us who have lost children. From my experiences, you kind of start the grief process and you're just, again, you've just had the blinders on for months and you're just trying to, basically put one foot in front of the other. And then it's about the big like anniversaries and days, right? And it's like Christmas is brutal and Thanksgiving for us, birthdays, things like that. And then for me, slowly but surely, about a year out, I feel like I kind of was a little bit more open to actually processing a lot more of the world in general and the grief, as opposed to I turned straight to anger, depression, tons of guilt over, not like you mentioned, the fact that even though wrestling with the fact that I knew that I had sat there with Janelle and we had examined everything. We looked at everything in this entire country and we picked up our family and moved across the world. I know we did everything, but I still didn't do enough, right? And so that guilt and some shame in there, stuff like that. And at a year out, I started to realize that it's not about the birthdays. Those are still tough for sure. But it's just like you said, for the rest of our lives, every time we turn a corner, something is happening that she'll never do. Something is happening for my going into her senior year now, daughter Avery. They were incredibly close. 2 years apart, thick as thieves. She got her driver's license. And it was like the big dream was for them to be, bopping around in her little car and doing it. And then now she's like got, she talks about it all the time, the empty passenger seat. And it just breaks my heart. And it's like, well, who would have thought that that was going to be? Sometimes, again, we're still incredibly close with her friends and their parents. A lot of her friends' moms serve as board members, incredibly close community. And I love seeing what those kids are doing. I mean, we go to their stuff sometimes, we'll go to their plays at school, or we'll go to a game or something like that. And it's awesome to see them, but you can't not sit there and just go, what if, and just kind of be in that sadness for what could have been for McKenna. It's certainly a loss for me, but I think what I have become a lot more in tune to is what you were talking about. And I know that a lot of the grief process is eternal, and it's just it moves. It's always moving and shaping and shifting and growing over here and then shifting over there. And so I've become a lot more in tune to what could have been lately, right? And thinking about that, and I'll see, a young kid doing something awesome, and I'm like, and those are everywhere, right? It's not like you have to circle off 5 days on the calendar and like prepare for those and survive those, if that's, that's how I did it for the first year anyway. But then it becomes about all of these other things that, oh, she would have loved this. And, I don't know. It's an interesting and difficult, landscape. Certainly, I think for all of us. And the only way that I have found it to be tolerable to kind of move through, and again, like you said, stay productive, and also this right here, doing this work. And it's not always advocacy, but if it's something helping a pediatric cancer family or pediatric cancer as a cause, I'm like, I got to get a couple hours or an hour a day of at least brainstorming of ideas and just staying committed to doing this work and building community, meeting other men like yourself and women. But I feel like it's a special bond with the dads for sure. And so building that community has, I think, ultimately probably saved my life, because I bottomed out pretty hard about 8 months. I was doing real bad. And so, this is the way that we make it through, right, is together, I think. Because unfortunately, we still are and always will be in a position where people can't truly understand unless you've gone through it. And while we certainly we want as few people to go through it as humanly possible, it does ultimately make them then harder to find people who have that direct experience connection. But when you start doing the work in the spaces, you find out how many of them there are, and the community is strong and getting stronger, which I'm eternally grateful for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, when I talk to people, I always tell them that I don't want you to understand truly how we feel. I just want you to listen and realize that this is real life. This is something tragic that happened to us. My wife knows I'm the emotional one in the relationship. I'm the one that breaks down. I'm the one that has really hard days. And it's because I put 100% of my time into trying to figure this out and, question things and critical thinking and whatever it is. Because again, it's that dad in me, it's that failure thought process in me that I think that we had to have missed something, but there's not enough answers. There's not enough people that are really questioning it, but our community is growing, which is good and bad. Horrible because there's more and more people that we're finding that need to be a part of this, but good because we're finding each other and we're becoming resources. And I think out of everything that we've done, money we've donated, events we've hosted, the podcast, the organized, all of that, the one thing that I'm the most proud of is our resources page on our website, because I've always said that if I don't have the answer, I know who does. And I have phone numbers, hundreds and hundreds of people over the years that we've met that if any point in time if I didn't know, I know who to reach out to. And that's huge, because that's a network that we didn't have in going through this. We had no idea who were we supposed to talk to. And, it'll be on July 3rd, it'll be 5 years since JC passed. And I will tell everybody that is on the outside of this, it gets harder every single year. Every single anniversary that passes, it's harder. It doesn't get easier, as time doesn't heal a damn thing. Okay. It gets worse. And it's because every year you realize This is what should have been happening. This is where we should be right now. This is what we should be doing. I left my job of 12 years to focus 100% on this because this was more important to me than having money in the bank. We figure it out. Every day we figure it out. And my wife and I have part-time jobs now, and that brings in what we need to take care of things. But it was like, if I'm going every single day, I'm losing out on the opportunity to figure out what I need to do next and where I need to be. And we need to be flexible, because if we've got to travel to Washington or we've got to travel to Madison to meet with somebody to do something, I want to have that opportunity. And we've had, I think, of everybody out there, a couple people that we can talk to when it comes to, legislation, and they're always been on our side and things like that. But the family side of it is that, we have a very, very small circle of people that we can trust, that are there for us at any drop of a hat if we need it, and we're there for them. And that's important every day for us to get up and know that we have that, because otherwise it is very easy for us to, hit the bottom of the barrel and not know how to crawl out of it. But in those moments, and I think you can probably relate to this, because I think these kids, they care, even on those last moments, they care more about how we're going to handle it tomorrow than they do about what they're going through. Because I think they're at peace, and they know that they're going to be okay. They worry. And I tell this story, and this is usually where I break, but I tell this story every day because I want people to realize what we're missing out on with them not being here. And not just because they're our kids. What we're missing out on is the innocence and the incredible hearts that we don't have. I looked at our daughter in the eyes, and I knew what was happening. At that moment, before she passed, I knew what was happening. I said, "Are you okay?" She shook her head yes. And then she went into that sleep that so many of us have to watch. She worried more about how we were going to be at that moment. These kids were missing out on that. And every day we get up and fight so that more kids don't have to have those moments. They're just going to worry about, I went through something tough, but I'm going to move on in my life, and we're going to beat this, because they're going to have those options. They're going to have the therapies and the treatment and things like the Give Kids a Chance Act. That is huge. And I wish that we would have had that 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I'm hoping more and more comes out. I'm hoping states jump on board. I'm hoping that federally they jump on board, and we come together and realize this is you want a true global pandemic? This is it. Our kids are not surviving past elementary school or middle school to getting into when they're going to really start their lives. And we're missing out on 70, 80 years of possibilities of giving them the opportunities to create something that, to take care of us in our old age, which is what they're supposed to do.
Right.
We joke all the time here in our houses, put us in the finest home whenever we start to get crazy. But, we're going to be left out in the dark because we're not going to have these kids around. And that's what we need. We need more of that heart, that innocence, and we need more of these people, or these children, and their personalities moving forward.
I agree 1,000%.